What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Crypto Rundown. Coming off of the week of high volatility, as the dust settles, you know we got to see what's going on. So we have Brendan to go over the charts and information. Brendan, what are you seeing?
Yeah, Tevo, we're seeing a lot of information come out of these Bitcoin and Ethereum spot ETFs. Most recently, we're finally seeing some inflows, and man, a lot of the outflows have completely diminished. In fact, we've seen a reduction specifically on the Ethereum end by nearly 90% from these Ethereum spot ETFs. It's a huge deal. We want to talk about the effect that this is going to have on the market and also just the overall market structure between Bitcoin and Ethereum and Solana and the traditional altcoin market, because there is so many things happening.
Absolutely. And we have a great clip of Morgan Stanley beginning to offer the Bitcoin ETFs. It's something you're want to hear. It's great perspective from Josh Brown. And then the final part of this Crypto Sunday, the cherry on top, we talk about Ripple. XRP Ripple, not mentioned a lot on this channels, and it's not because we necessarily don't like it. We love the XRP army. We just try to give it to you straight as we see it. So make sure you stay to the end to hear what we have to say about the Ripple case being settled. Guys, the timestamps are below so you can watch what you want to watch when you want to watch it. Please give us a like, subscribe, and comment, and enjoy the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Crypto Market Rundown, where we talk about everything that's happening in the great world of cryptocurrency. From the fundamental in the news to the technicals on the charts, we spend the time doing hours of research so that you all don't have to. And we are back at it again with another action-packed week in the crypto markets. Isn't that right, Tevo?
Yeah, absolutely. Digesting last week's wild swing from, that huge sell-off going into the weekend, obviously that bloody Monday, and then, finding the balance and basically a little bit of comeback on the end of the week. So, just a good example, never to overreact to one data point or one sell-off and try to zoom out and see the bigger picture, and that's why we're here.
Yeah, and everything that you just mentioned is causing quite a bit of choppiness in the markets. We have Bitcoin with just these monumental moves from like 60K all the way back down to 50K, and there's just a lot of volatility in between. But I will say that some of the cool things that have come out of this is that Ethereum is getting a lot of love. And it's not the only one. We've been talking a lot in recent weeks about how Bitcoin dominance has been so high. In fact, it hit a new multi-year high that we're going to show everyone in today's episode. But on top of that, Ethereum is seeing a lot of love here. Solana's been getting a lot of attention, as we've been bringing up over the past couple of weeks. And another one to show a big win that we don't always talk about over here is XRP Ripple. So we're going to be talking about literally things from all ends of the crypto space. We have another major traditional financial manager coming to the forefront, offering Bitcoin as a potential asset to some of their clients. And we want to make sure that we cover everything in between. So first things first, what in the world is happening here with these Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs? It feels like every time we do one of these rundowns, one of the most requested things is, guys, what is happening on the ETF front? And rightfully so, right? I mean, we have seen so much attention and money get kind of poured into these things. In fact, I was just looking at the Bitcoin spot ETFs and kind of where they're at now, and I saw that they have about 920,000 Bitcoin in assets under management between all of those centralized spot ETFs combined. Now, for the listeners out there, if you're wondering like how much that is in reference, well, there's only 21 million Bitcoin that can ever exist in Bitcoin's maximum circulation. At the time of making this, I believe there's about 19.5 million Bitcoin that is actually circulating around. Several million of that has actually been lost over the years, over the last 15 years of Bitcoin's lifespan. And so in reality, 920,000 Bitcoin is quite a bit of the supply that's tied up into these SPY ETFs. And so that numbers continues to grow. And a big reason why that's so important is because a lot of those investors are more long-term investors. They're not short-term day traders. They're not flipping this thing, 5 times a day, every week. I'd say the vast majority of those spot ETF holders are more on the long-term viewpoint. They're on that like long-term approach when it comes to Bitcoin. And I think that is why it's one of the net positives. another kind of cool thing that we've actually seen since that Bitcoin ETF came out is that BlackRock was at first, Grayscale was at first the largest contributor to that. They held the most Bitcoin. And as they have continued to sell off, right, it's kind of a meme at this point and how much we've talked about it. But as Grayscale has continued to sell off more and more and more, just billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, and BlackRock and their clients have continued to buy, BlackRock has actually dethroned Grayscale as the number one Bitcoin holder. And so I want to flash something up on the screen here in just a second to kind of show everyone exactly what I'm talking about. But it is a pretty convincing chart. So let's go ahead and flash this up on the screen for everyone here, because I think that you all will find this quite interesting. And if you are listening in on Audible or on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts or anything like that where you can't see all the charts and all the images, all you need to do is actually head over to our YouTube channel, which is the Crypto 101 podcast on YouTube. And you're going to be able to see all these visuals and charts that we are referencing during this. So if we scroll down over here, here is the Bitcoin ETF flows, which have actually seen quite a good time recently. I don't want to spoil that because we're going to be coming back to it in just a little bit over here, because we've actually been seeing net inflows on both the Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs. But before we get into that, I want to briefly just zoom in onto this chart right here. So I'm going to zoom us in a little bit. We're going to scroll back down here and find this thing. But as of around today, as of yesterday, technically, there is about 919,500 Bitcoin that is inside of these ETFs. Now, you'll see at the start of this, Grayscale was the giant. At the very, very start here, Grayscale had a ginormous amount of market share. And then as time has gone on, they were dethroned fairly quickly, might I add, by BlackRock. And you can see how BlackRock has just been accumulating market share and growing and growing and growing. And the other one to notice here is that Fidelity has been doing the same thing. In fact, all of the ETFs have been gradually gaining in market share, with the one exception being Grayscale over here. Now, this is all significant and this is all important because if we look at what's happening with some of these Ethereum ETFs, we can see that the outflows have almost entirely dissipated. In fact, we've seen a 90% cut in the outflows from these Ethereum spot ETFs. Now, what I mean by that is if we look at this chart over here, I'm going to zoom us in just a little bit more so we can see this a bit more clearly. But when we go down to this thing, we can see that the outflows have gone from consistently being around minus $300, minus $400 million in daily outflows to now being around minus 30 to minus 40 million in daily outflows. And the inflows are actually starting to come back up over here and come a little bit alive. But there hasn't been a ton of activity. I think that the biggest takeaway from these Ethereum ETFs is that we always said, hey, watch out for the first 2 to 3 weeks of this thing. There can be quite a bit of outflows. We saw this with the Bitcoin ETF. We're probably going to see it with the Ethereum ETF. And that's exactly what we've seen so far, is just this giant number of outflows at the beginning, and it's tapering off over time. And again, since these things have launched, we've seen about a 90% reduction in the amount of outflows that we're seeing every single day in Ethereum. And this is being reflected in price. We're going to look at the price charts in a moment here, but you'll see that Ethereum dominance is starting to kind of catch back up in recent days now that it's starting to have some potential positive inflows and other stuff like that. But this was a big holding factor for a lot of people. They were saying, hey, we looked at how the Bitcoin ETFs kind of reacted to launching and what happened with Grayscale at the beginning and some of the outflows and things like that. And this could probably happen to Ethereum, and that's exactly the way that this played out. Now what we're seeing is the second half. Now, if you remember back to the Bitcoin ETFs, there was about a 2-week window where we saw a lot of outflows, and thus the price of Bitcoin fell by about 21%. We've talked about this pretty frequently on these crypto market rundowns. And then after we pushed through that 2 to 3 week window after the Bitcoin spot ETFs came out, that's where Bitcoin started to turn around. That's where the outflows started to kind of taper off. That's where we saw prices go back on the rise. And I think that Ethereum's finally entering into that stage of the market here as we see the outflows kind of go away and we're starting to see these days of net inflow return to the Ethereum ETFs. Now, one of the big takeaways and one of the big things that I've noticed here on the Ethereum chart as we take a look at it is that pressure continues to build. I mean, Ethereum is pushing higher. It's trying to get back up towards a lot of these major moving averages higher and kind of push back towards $3,000. And there's a lot of buying pressure. And I think the good sign here that I've noticed from the Ethereum chart is that it is seeing a very consistent trend since this local bottom about a week ago, where it is seeing lower swing highs and a pretty steady level of resistance. Now, most people would associate this with something called an ascending triangle. It's a very bullish formation here for anyone that is a technical analyst. And essentially what it means is that there is a bullish squeeze happening on the Ethereum chart where the bulls are essentially pushing all of their effort and force into a steady level of resistance. They're wearing down all of the sell orders. They're wearing down all of the bearish pressure. And thus, this typically leads to a breakout. Now, of course, there's no guarantees, but I'm looking at this and I like what's happening from Ethereum. If we go and we look at the Ethereum kind of dominance chart when compared to Bitcoin, this thing's seen kind of a nice little bottom and recovery off the lows. We'll see how long this lasts, which kind of leads me into my second point of Bitcoin dominance continuing to remain very, very strong. Yesterday, probably one of the bigger Bitcoin dominance sell-offs that we've seen. And that seems to be almost entirely eaten back up today. Bitcoin dominance fell by over 1% yesterday, about 1.2 to 1.3%. And almost all of that is being reacquired in today's push upwards. Now, if we go back to Ethereum, Ethereum's actually red on today, Bitcoin's green on the day, and I think that that has been a big factor inside of this. But Bitcoin continues to remain strong. In fact, this is the highest that we've seen Bitcoin dominance in about the last several years. We pushed up to around 57.73%. And when we look at this, I mean, the last time that we even saw those kind of relative numbers was all the way back in April of 2021. So there's a lot of things that's happening over here, and Bitcoin seems to be the market leader. And there are outliers, right? We're looking at the altcoin market. There's a lot of recovery over here. Maker's up 6% on the day. Stacks is up over 10%. We have Immutable X, which is up 7%. There's clearly a lot of activity and movement in the altcoin market, but I still think people are looking at the traditional side of things saying, hey, where should I be like putting my risk? You know, is this now a 1 out of 10 risk? Should I be really safe with my money? Is it a 5 out of 5? Are we still trying to determine what's happening here with the traditional indices in the US and the Japanese markets and interest rates as we talked about last week? Or are we starting to ease back into a much more risk-friendly market where it's like a 9 or a 10 out of 10 risk? And I will say, I don't think we're there yet, Tevo. I don't think we're back to, and I'm curious to get your opinion on this, because I don't really see us at this super high risk friendly area of the market yet.
No, I would agree. I think there's not just the crypto markets, you know, like last week we talked about the traditional markets and just the, you know, the whole, the world is kind of in an interesting almost standstill of there's just so much geopolitical things going on around the world, inflation, and elections coming up that everybody can kind of, I think there's people trying to pick their lanes and place their bets. And I think there's always value in any market. You can try and find it where it is. But yeah, a full on risk on scenario does not seem to be the right move in any markets across the world right now.
Yeah, I would agree. We're seeing a lot of that, but I don't think it's so one-sided where there's a lot of people out there who are like, I want nothing to do with crypto. Maybe I want nothing to do with altcoins. And I think that there's a healthy balance. In fact, I'm looking at the crypto markets right now, and I think that there's a ton of these altcoins that are still at discounts. And when we look at like the larger altcoin market, something like maybe the others chart, which essentially gives us the crypto market cap, excluding the top 10 cryptocurrencies. People look at this and they go, well, it's just weaker when compared to some of the larger caps like Bitcoin, like Solana, you know, like Ethereum even, I think you can argue, maybe even like BNB, which has been doing pretty well. People are looking at that and saying, hey, a lot of these large caps are doing better than the small caps. And that's just the nature of it. We always kind of say that the traditional altcoin market is a double-edged sword because of how volatile it is. It's going to move up faster in the bull markets in times of very risk-free and Cut. Yikes. It's going to move up faster whenever there is a more risk-friendly environment, and it's also going to move down faster in times like we're seeing right now. And so that's the double-edged sword of the altcoin market, is that you have bigger upwards movements and you also have bigger downwards movements. It's just easier to forget about all the good times and how much gains were made once we're in a little bit more of an extended downtrend, which is really all that I think that this is. Because we can go back to a lot of these things, and then this will be the final kind of spiel of my tangent over here. But we can go back to a lot of these and be like, hey, since the market kind of reversed and we look at a lot of these altcoins, plenty of them went on like 4, 5, 600%, a 1,000% move to the upside. And now we've seen a couple months of maybe them bleeding 30, 40, 50%. And people are like, why would I even invest in altcoins? And they forget that they just did 500% to the upside or 1,000% to the upside after seeing a little bit of red and downside movements. And so it just is a lesson, always zoom out on the charts and remember to have a well-rounded and healthy and just overall balanced portfolio.
Yeah, true game of psychology of the human brain is investing and kind of understanding your upside, but more importantly, understanding your risk to the downside and knowing yourself of what type of person are you when things go bad, or like you said, you see a 30% dip, but you had 100 or 200 or 300 to 500% upside. I think some people, I think it's human nature as well, that when you put your first little position in and then it hits that 50% or 100% upside and you put more in, and some people keep kind of buying till the top, and then the down ride's probably a lot harder for them. So just, all lessons learned along the way of investing and trading or whatever you're trying to do in these markets.
100%. And kind of going back to the Ethereum point, we mentioned that Ethereum could be getting ready to have its time in the spotlight. And some of the evidence to kind of support that is, I'm going to flash it up on the screen here. But Ethereum layer 2s have been getting a lot of attention here recently. We saw them set a new record with 12.42 million in daily transactions. We've seen scalability improving. We've seen user activity reaching new levels. And there's a lot of good stuff that's happening on the L2 front. And there's a lot of L2s that exist out there. I mean, you have Polygon, Matic, you have Arbitrum, you have Optimism. One of the other big ones that we like to talk about over here is Base, which continues to see a ton of attention as it steals market share away from the Ethereum L2 space. But Ethereum has been seeing a lot of attention as of recently, right? I think before this, there was a lot of talk about Solana and the scalability there. Towards the beginning of the year, there was a lot of attention towards other L1s. You had things like Sui, and you had Celestia, and you had a couple of those other ones that were competing. Say was another great example. Those got a lot of attention at the beginning of the year. And there's kind of been a shift back to Ethereum in recent months. And I think a lot of that has to do with just the overall direction of the market. When things go south, people look towards something that they can rely on, something that they know has weathered a bunch of these bear markets, something that they know is going to be around at the end of the day. And that's why I think a lot of these people and these users are going back towards Ethereum. Now, I want to clarify, I'm not a maximalist. We've talked about Solana and a lot of these other major L1s quite a bit over here on the channel. And I think that there's a place for both of them. I don't really see a world where there's just a single winner in all of cryptocurrency or a single winner in all of the L1s that are out there. But what I will say is that, in times of scarcity or in times where people are a little bit more nervous about what's happening, they tend to go back to what they can rely on in some of these larger caps like Ethereum. And it's seeing a lot of love. So maybe this kind of translates to price. Maybe it translates to dominance in the coming months. I think overall time will tell, but I want to move us back to the charts to kind of just recap the overall state of the crypto market before we get into some of this other news, looking at what's happening with Ripple and Morgan Stanley. So when we look at Bitcoin over here, we are rallying off of one of our previous macro highs back up to the 200 and the 50 and the 20-day moving average. And I mean, Tevo, look at how tight some of these are. When we look at all these moving averages here, they're basically all just like on top of each other, which is a rare occurrence. We don't see this happen every day. And the big kind of takeaway that I've seen here is that we've been testing this level as a pretty consistent zone of resistance. It doesn't take any kind of a TA expert to look at this and go, hey, all the major moving averages here and all these candles are really struggling to get through them. Basically since last Thursday, we've seen a rejection of the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and now Tuesday daily candles all in here beneath the 200-day moving average, beneath the 50, beneath the 20. And one of the other metrics that I've been kind of using over here is just using the AVWAP from the all-time high and plotting that to the current price. And that's another thing that we've been kind of consolidating beneath over here. Now, I think that this is a good and a bad scenario, and I'm going to explain how that's possible. But the good side is that if we're able to get through this and kind of get back above this, I think we recontest one of the major resistance points that's pushing towards 70K. Until we can do that, until we can break this, we're seeing that there's a lot of resistance on Bitcoin around 62 to 63K. Until we can start getting through this zone, I think it's going to be a pretty big resistance level, and I would not count out a lower touch point. So that's one of the things that I'm watching over here is saying, hey, if we really do see a rejection of this, we can probably get a retest of the high 40s, low 50s on Bitcoin. If we are able to break out here and kind of get through this big resistance level that we're at, then I wouldn't count out 70,000. And I think a lot of people are excited about that. The next logical question is everyone saying, when in the world are we going to get altcoin season again? And to that I say, we might just need a little bit of patience. I think the number one thing that we need to see in an altcoin season over here is the fall of Bitcoin dominance, which, as we talked about earlier, has been on a tear. And judging from the way that it's recovering today, it does not look like it's done yet. It's seeing a really strong bounce and continues to kind of outperform the vast majority of altcoins. So whenever I'm looking at an altcoin season, I think we need both Ethereum and Solana doing better than Bitcoin. And right now they've kind of been struggling to do that. Solana's been doing it better than Ethereum, but even then Ethereum needs to be outperforming Bitcoin on a consistent basis before we can get a true and tried altcoin season. So if you're one of the people that's watching out there, look at the others chart or the ETH BTC chart or the Bitcoin dominance chart and look for a pivot happening there first. And I think that that's going to be one of the biggest signs or indicators that could lead us into a true alt season. So let's talk about what's happening over here with Morgan Stanley. Now, this news I think broke last week. We might have even referenced this on our previous rundown, but this is big news. In fact, I think we have a clip from this. Is that right, Tevo?
Yeah. So the news, it was Wednesday, and then just on one of the CNBC halftime shows, Josh Brown and Bryn, one of the market analysts on those shows, announced that they were buying some Bitcoin ETF, and I like Josh Brown. I think he's really good at putting things into perspective. And so here's a clip of him kind of giving his perspective on what this means for Bitcoin adoption, really. So here's the clip.
Morgan Stanley is the largest wealth management firm, I guess, in the world at this point, but certainly in the United States. They've got 15,000 registered reps who were just given the green light to buy two different Bitcoin ETFs. One is Fidelity's and the others is the iShares product. And I don't know if they will necessarily adopt it at a high rate or very quickly. But what I do know is this is like the last taboo. When large wealth management firms, big investment banks on Wall Street are giving the green light to their wealth management advisors to allocate, it's only going to be a matter of time before it gets more traction. And that would be my bet. So I think Bryn is making a good move here. The price could do anything in the next 24 hours. I have no idea if it's a great price to buy, but just directionally, we know that more adoption, not less, is what's going to be likely in the next 6 months.
So you hear the talking points there. The taboo is over. The trend is higher. Adoption. This guy is a professional at the highest level on TV all the time. And, these were the people that weren't talking about it, even a year ago, right? The last 5 years. Like, this isn't the conversations that have been happening around Bitcoin in general. And as Brendan mentioned in the beginning, what are they allowed to buy? Fidelity and BlackRock, the two ones that have gained the most market share in the Bitcoin ETF market. So he tied a bow on it. He said, yeah, tomorrow we don't know what the price is going to do. Hell, I don't know what it's going to do next week or next month, but the adoption curve on this is more, and in his mind the trend is higher.
Yeah, I love that point that he made is like, guys, it's just a matter of time. They have 15,000 reps over here, and they were just greenlit to offer Bitcoin to their clients. And keep in mind, Morgan Stanley, they don't have an ETF, and they're like, we don't need to. We can just use some of these other ones that are circulating around. We can use the Fidelity one. We can use the BlackRock one. And now that they are allowed to kind of push or advise people to hold these things, it just goes to show that the adoption curve is there, and this thing is going mainstream, and it's going mainstream fast. And time will tell. I like the point that he made, that he's like, listen, guys, anything can happen over the next 24 hours. And I would agree with that, right? Especially right now, we're seeing a lot of choppy prices. We're moving up 10%. We're moving down 10%. I would go so far as to even say, hey, anything can happen over the next week. Anything can happen over the next month. But zoom out here. The uptrend of Bitcoin is still very strong. And I think for Bitcoin specifically, more so than the entire crypto industry, you can look at its dominance and its track record, and the thing looks really, really strong at the moment. And I think that these wealth advisors see it, and we see it as well, which is, of course, why we are reporting on it. So I'm interested to see how this plays out. And maybe, we come back in a year from now and we circle back and we're like, okay, well, how much Bitcoin does Morgan Stanley have under management? And who knows what that number will be? Maybe it'll be 100 million. Maybe it'll be $1 billion worth of Bitcoin. Maybe it'll be $10 billion worth of Bitcoin. Time will tell. But I am interested to circle back like a year from now and see how much the total Bitcoin under like centralized custodians and management has increased from the point that it's at today. Because one of the biggest takeaways that I'll ever have from a guy that we've had on the show and we talk about a lot over here, being James Safart, and also referencing Matt Hogan from Bitwise, two of the biggest takeaways that I've gotten from them is that the adoption curve really starts to kick in from some of the bigger players after about a year into these ETFs, because there's a lot of major players who want all of the craziness and volatility kind of worked out. They want all the kinks figured out as well. And then once this is an established product, that's when they kind of look at it and go, okay, as a bigger player, I am ready to get into this thing.
Well, here's a question. So Grayscale is kind of losing their market share with selling, right? So I mean, if it's like a horse race, the Kentucky Derbies, I think, is another James Safar. I don't know if he came up with it, but I see it a lot. Who do you think like 5 years from now has the number one, Bitcoin under management? BlackRock, Fidelity, obviously out of the gate. Do they make it so big that they are the top tier leaders, or do you think Grayscale has a branding issue and they can kind of turn it around because they were technically one of the first?
Yeah, you know what? I think it's hard to fight against the like of BlackRock and Fidelity. Grayscale, I don't think that they've done enough to remain competitive. They had first movers advantage, and I think that what they needed was a lower fee structure from the get-go. They probably needed some better features to kind of keep customers retained, and they just haven't seemed as interested in doing that. When you look at a lot of these other ETFs right out the gate, I think the Bitcoin ETF is a great example of that. They had a substantially higher fee for both their Bitcoin and their Ethereum native ETFs, to the likes that they were like almost 10 times higher from a fee structure. And their clients aren't going to want to use that. Their interfaces probably aren't as good. They definitely don't have nearly as good of a reputation when it comes to these things. They're a smaller player. And so usually you see the most competitiveness, the most eagerness come out of the smaller player to steal market share. And it was the opposite effect of they were like, oh, well, we have the most. And I don't know if it was because they were trying to pay off legal fees or whatever it might have been, but I don't know. I don't think that they've done enough. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see the decentralized TradFi players of Fidelity and BlackRock specifically kind of dominating this thing. Now, I think the one saving grace here is Bitwise. I think Bitwise has done a phenomenal job. Matt Hogan, again, we reference him again. He is great. We've had him on. I think that they know what they're doing. And if there's anyone that I think that can compete with the likes of Fidelity and BlackRock, I think it's Bitwise. So we'll see over time like what happens there. But from Grayscale's unique perspective, I don't really see them being able to compete. In fact, I continue to see Fidelity and BlackRock stealing market share away from Grayscale for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to watch, and as we do here, we'll keep you updated. Brendan's always got all the right stats and charts, and we break it down, and so I think it'll definitely be a fun thing to check in. Definitely, every 6 months to a year, if not quarterly.
Definitely. Well, Tevo, let's talk about something that we rarely ever talk about over here.
Shocked. I saw it on the rundown list. I'm shocked.
The forbidden word, the forbidden project. No, all jokes aside, we're going to talk about XRP. This is going to be a hot topic, a hot talking point, because, man, I was just talking about this with friends. I was talking about it with, us and coworkers. They have been in the news quite a bit here recently. And I think it's finally worth addressing them. So what in the world's happening over here with XRP? Well, they have been ordered to pay a $125 million fine as punishment for this case that they've been in. Now, this is a big deal because this is a lot less than the $2 billion fine that they were initially requested to pay from the SEC. So it's gone down from roughly around the $2 billion mark down to a $125 million mark. Now, a lot of people are looking at this as a win, and I would agree. I would say that this is a net win, and regardless of whether you liked XRP, you hated it, you bought it, you sold it, you never wanted to touch it, you're the biggest hodler in the world, no matter who you are in the crypto space, I think the vast majority of us were rooting for XRP to win this case because it sets a positive standard for the rest of these altcoin projects that have been trying to get sued by the SEC. And I would go even further than projects, Tevo, and say exchanges too. I know your beloved Robinhood has been attacked by the SEC. Coinbase has, Kraken has. And it's like, Gary, what are you doing, man?
Yeah, it's disgusting behavior from the SEC chair. It's like the guy's hands out Wells notice like it's Halloween on candy. Like, it's crazy.
It's the worst kind of Halloween candy that we can get. And so we like to see a little bit of justice come over here. But the big question for everyone is, is this a net positive for XRP? Because what this does is this kind of puts the final nail in the coffin of this XRP case and argument. And it doesn't make it completely done, right? There's still some stuff that can happen with this. It's not completely done, but we can start to see the end coming, right? This thing is coming to a close. It looks like the dust is starting to settle over here, and the finalities of this are in the works. Now, in reaction to this, XRP had quite the sizable move to the upside, where it went from around 43 cents all the way up to around 64 cents. I know that a lot of the XRP community was finding this move a little bit lackluster. I've talked to buddies who are big XRP fanatics, and they were saying, hey, this thing can go back to $1, $5, $20 after this case gets resolved for the most part. And it didn't do that. It had a really nice move. In fact, if we measure this from top to bottom and kind of what just happened over here, we can see that it was about a 50% move. That's nice. That's really good. I think most people would look at about a 50% move in around a 3 to 4 day window, and they'd say that's a good move. But I still think that there is people in the XRP community that are finding this lackluster. And the one thing that I just want to remind everyone about is that, again, I think that this is great that they are coming out of this thing and a lot better that they went into it. I just want to remind everyone to look at what's feasible. This is still a $32.5 billion project. If you're going to see this thing move 1,000%, a 10x, even a 2x, that would mean that it needs roughly $30 billion to flow into it to cause a 2x move. If you want a 10x move, it would need roughly $320 billion to come into this thing. And so for everyone out there who's a big XRP fan, I think that this win, right? It's a good one. It's a big case win. I think it's a net positive for XRP. Am I still the most interested in it? I'm not. I think even with this news, it's failed to hit a higher high. And that's been one of my biggest gripes with XRP is the fact that it just has been unable to move to a higher high in terms of price. And that's one of the staples of an uptrend that it has struggled to make. Now, maybe because this is settled, maybe it can finally do that, right? Maybe we can see that. I am not rooting against it. I want all of cryptos to succeed. However, I still have my doubts here, Tevo. I'm not fully on board the XRP train yet.
Yeah, from a project standpoint, that's not my expertise, but they have an amazing XRP army. They're all over X. They're all over the internet, really. So, if the XRP army is around, I want to be friends with them. I don't want to go against the whole entire army.
No.
So yeah,
there's only two of us.
Yeah. No, the XRP army is always welcome. We got a lot of other projects we can talk about too. But yeah, just wish everybody the best as long as they're doing it the right way and trying to build a good team and a good project. Like all power to them. But obviously there's different ways to build stuff, and good luck to them.
Agreed, man. Yeah, again, not wishing the downfall for anyone in the crypto space, but I think one of the ways that they could potentially turn this thing around and kind of reverse their macro trend that they've been in for the last several years is with the idea of this new stablecoin that they're offering. Now, I'm going to go out on a little bit of a conspiracy limb here and say, hey, if they start copying and taking after what Maker and MakerDAO is doing, I think that they can really see some nice upside. I think that they need a little bit of a change to some of the core values of XRP. I think that they can keep the overall narrative. There's some cool products and services and partnerships that they have there, but I think that if they structure their model a little bit more to resemble what Maker is doing, I think it'll go a long way. Now, the reason that I bring this up is because Maker is a very popular cryptocurrency. They also happen to have a stable coin that relates to the project called DAI. It's a very successful stable coin over there, and also they work a lot in the tokenization and RWA space. Now, XRP is coming in here as a well-established crypto, good partnerships, large market cap, and they're coming in here and saying, hey, we're going to open up a stable coin as well. And we've seen them recently start moving into the tokenization space, where I saw them, they just had a big tokenization partnership. I forget exactly who it was for, but they're starting to do this as well. And so I'm starting to see some similarities. We'll see if they change their investment thesis or their project thesis, I think you can call it. We'll see if that changes at all. But I think that they have potential here, that if they adjust with the times, so to say, like we see that happen with a lot of projects, right? Even companies, like you have to adapt to the times. You can't stay the same you can't do the same thing that you were doing 5 years ago, 7 years ago, back in the 2017-18 bull run. Like you need to adapt to the times, which it looks like they're trying to do it, but I just think that there needs to be a little bit more substance there. And, who knows? Maybe they could turn around. Maybe they do want to compete with MakerDAO. Maybe they have no plans to do any of the things that I just talked about. And I'm just going off on a side tangent about who knows what. But there's potential here. And that's the big thing that I want to talk about is I hope to see positive changes made because we want to see all of cryptocurrency succeed. And this is one of the bigger projects in the crypto markets. So fingers crossed here, we can get out of this long-term downtrend. And even though for the time being, it's not for me, that could change. That could change over time. And, there was a time and point where I was big on Solana, and then I was very adamantly against it after the Alameda stuff. And then I recognized my wrongs and I said, hey, I'm going to reverse my stance on this. And so, that can happen with anything. And I think the ultimate kind of teller here will be time.
Yeah, great point. Always open to change your thoughts and opinions as the facts change with them, right?
Absolutely. Well, I think before we go here, we can just give everyone a quick reminder that there's a lot of volatility in these markets, right? Kind of referencing back to what we were saying earlier, anything can happen over the next 24 hours. Anything can happen over the next week. We're going to see some up movements. We're going to see some down movements. That's just all native to the crypto space. It's an inherent part of why we're here in the first place, is because we like the volatility. But the truth of the matter is that the volatility goes both directions. the big thing that we want everyone to kind of pay attention to is that there's a lot of really positive things happening behind the scenes. As we were saying today, we have the outflows from the Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs diminishing. We're seeing net inflows here with some of these ETFs as well. We're seeing record levels of activity and users on these Ethereum L2s. We're seeing Morgan Stanley now offering the Bitcoin ETF to their clients. We're seeing Ripple kind of resolve this case in a much better fashion that they started it. There's all these positive things that are happening in the fundamental side behind the scenes. And that's the stuff that we like to pay attention to, because regardless of what happens over the course of the next day or week or month, we're here for the long term. And that's one of the cool things about these dips, is that it really does present us with quite a nice opportunity. So that's going to round us off for this week's episode, everyone. We hope all of you enjoyed. And all that we ask here is that if you like the material that we go over here, consider hitting that like button, consider hitting that subscribe button, leave us a review. We love hearing from all of you. And if you're on YouTube, leave us a comment. We like seeing what everyone is up to as well. But that's going to be a wrap, and we're going to see all of you at the same time, same place next week.